The Third Reich is synonymous with brutality, execution and depravity on a mass scale. Much is documented about the Holocaust and the persecution that faced Jewish people since the rise of Adolf Hitler in the early 1930s. The systematic way of killing developed by the Nazis would lead to the deaths of millions of Europe's innocent population. However, how would dissidents and those who spoke out within the German population be treated? Today, we visit the story of one man who history has mostly forgotten. Today we tell the story of Johann Reichhart, Hitler's Nazi executioner. Remember, if you do enjoy these videos, please support the channel by subscribing. Johann Reichhart was born into a family of Bavarian executioners and knackers, a knacker being someone who disposes of dead or dying animals. This family tradition of executioners went back allegedly 8 generations in the Reichhart family to the 1700s. Johann, following school, would complete an apprenticeship as a butcher and served as a soldier in the First World War. After growing tired of working in the slaughterhouse, Johann would apply to become an executioner for the Bavarian State Ministry of Justice in Munich in 1924, assuming the post from his retiring uncle. The ministry announced, from April 1, 1924, Reichhart takes over the execution of all death sentences coming in the Free State of Bavaria to the execution by beheading with the guillotine. Reichhart was paid 150 gold marks plus 10 marks for daily expenses and given a third-class railway ticket. Executions in Germany decreased during 1924 to 1928, and Reichhart had executed only 23 people throughout this time, with one only being executed in 1928. Here he struggled to make a living for his family and would transition into other work. He negotiated with the Bavarian Ministry of Justice for himself to seek out different work and other ventures, whilst remaining as an executioner. He attempted many different business ventures, including becoming a greengrocer, starting a wagon transport business, and owning an inn. His work as a greengrocer would take him to The Hague in the Netherlands, and he would become rather successful with this business. In the spring of 1931 and in July 1932, Reichhart travelled to Munich to carry out the death sentences at Stadelheim prison. In this month, Dutch newspapers discovered his activities, and as a result, his greengrocer business dwindled and he returned to Munich. It was at this point Reichhart considered quitting his work as an executioner. When Hitler rose to power in 1933, Reichhart would find his work as an executioner would become more frequent. He signed a new contract with the Bavarian Ministry of Justice, and he now received a fixed and significantly higher annual salary, which was paid monthly. On the 18th of July 1933, he was also given more work, as the Ministry of Justice requested that he was authorised to execute in Saxony, and he would get bonuses for doing this. Reichhart now would not need to worry about his finances anymore. The method of execution that Reichhart would use was the guillotine. Made famous by the French during the time of the Revolution, this device was created to execute as many people as possible over a short amount of time. Reichhart would immerse himself into this role, and even invented a device called the double detective tongs that would pin a prisoner down without them needing to be tied down with a rope. This metal clamp held the prisoner beneath the guillotine, thus reducing the execution time to just 4 seconds. From September 1933, Reichhart would join many different groups associated with National Socialism or the Nazis, including the Nationalist Socialist War Victims' Care, the National Socialist People's Welfare, and the German Labour Front. He would join the Nazi Party officially in April 1937. The Reich Ministry of Justice, by decree of August 25, 1937, would reassign the areas of responsibility and named 3 executioners. Reichhart would be named and responsible for the executions in Munich, Dresden, Stuttgart and Weimar. Following the annexation of Austria, Reichhart gave Weimar to another executioner and added Vienna and Frankfurt to his territories. During this service, Reichhart would continue to try and innovate and accelerate his work as an executioner. He believed he would try and make it less stressful for those convicted people. In around 1939, he would replace a tipping board with a fixed bench. The condemned would then be held by his assistants until the hatchet blade was dropped. Reichhart would also abolish the black blindfold, instead asking one of his assistants to hold the convict's eyes closed. Reichhart would carry out many different executions during the Nazis' reign of tyranny. He did this in many different cities around Germany. He would later become the executioner in Vienna too. Reichhart would also be made very wealthy by these killings, to the point where he could afford to buy a lavish villa in an affluent Munich suburb. The Nazis even charged the families of those he had imprisoned and beheaded. For each day a prisoner was held, a fee of 1.5 Reichmarks was charged, and executions cost 300 Reichmarks. From 1924 onwards, during the Weimar Republic and the reign of the Nazis, he would execute almost 3,000 people via a guillotine, with 250 of these being women, and he would also execute 59 by hanging. Johann Reichhart would become the most infamous executioner after executing Hans and Sophie Scholl, the most famous members of the resistance group, the White Rose. Reichhart would later say that he never saw anyone die as bravely as Sophie Scholl did. After the 20th of July plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler, the number of executions rose drastically. In December 1944, Reichhart would be promoted again, with his reign of terror now growing over more cities and prisons. Johann Reichhart would gain that much notoriety that his children were taunted at school, with them saying, "Your dad's a head cutter." The reputation of their father would one day lead to one of his sons dying from suicide. Following VE Day, Reichhart was arrested by the US Army and spent 1 week in Stadelheim prison for denazification. He wasn't tried with anything, as he was just carrying out his duties as an executioner. Following the war, he was employed by the US Office of Military Government to help execute 156 war criminals on the gallows at Landsberg. Previously, he had submitted proposals to the Reich Ministry of Justice for trialling the long drop with a British-style gallows, however this was rejected. At the end of May 1946, Reichhart had learned that he executed 2 innocent people due to mistaken identity. He would then retire and work only as a consultant. He would then later go on to advise American Master Sergeant John C. Woods, the man who was responsible of hanging the convicted war criminals of the Nuremberg trials. In May 1947, he would be thrown in prison. Following a denazification trial in December 1948, he would be sentenced to 2 years in a labour camp and lost half of his assets. Later, this sentence would be changed to 1 year in a camp and a 30% loss of his assets. Reichhart's profession made him a lonely person, and he would soon become depressed and his marriage would break down. As mentioned earlier, his son Hans would commit suicide in 1950, struggling to live with his father's occupation and reputation. Johann Reichhart would become despised and would live in poverty, living only on a small military pension from the First World War. He would later speak out against the death penalty in the 1960s and would die on the 26th of April 1972. Once again, thank you for watching. We hope you found this video quite interesting. To support the channel, please make sure to subscribe. Once again, thanks for watching.